I call the Des Moines City Council regular meeting for Thursday, February 3rd to order. And with that, I'd like Councilmember Nutting to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Nutting. Are there any correspondence?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. First, we need to do a roll call though, please.
Oh, yes, my apologies. Let the record state that all 6 council members are here.
Thank you very much.
Now for the correspondence.
Thank you, Mayor. There are no correspondence. The following people have provided written public comment. John Boekholt, vacant city council position. Bree Caswell, Yoshiko Grace Matsui, strong support for her application to fill the city council vacancy. Sandra Mock, the open council seat. Betsy Sproger, business grants and Tuscany break-in, and Liz Taylor, open council seat. Mayor, we had 2 people who wanted to sign up to speak tonight, Ann Craker and Jothan Frakes, but I don't see them here. Ann Craker wanted to talk about the RECOLOGY contract renewal, and Jothan Frakes wanted to talk about complaint, Marina Construction Noise, and hours of operation. There is a phone number here that I don't identify. So if that's one of them, then they're on, but otherwise those individuals are not on tonight.
So is the phone number 206-450-8792, either Ann Craker or Jothan Frakes?
It's Andrew.
Oh, Mayor.
Oh, it's Andrew. Okay.
Jothan's coming on. Jothan's coming on right now, Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, while we're waiting for him to come on, before we take comments from the public, I would just like to remind those that any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or who become boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the council will be muted and removed from the meeting, and they'll have 3 minutes to speak.
And he's in the meeting now, Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Frakes, you have the floor for the next 3 minutes, and welcome.
Thank you. I didn't realize I'd arrive and have this opportunity. I appreciate you hearing me, and I'm just delighted to live in this area. I've lived here 20 years plus, probably crossed your paths at many of the different farmers market events down at the marina, and a wonderful place to live. Up until the past couple of months, the construction that's going on at the marina is just absolutely creating a lot of noise nuisance during extended hours. And it's become very, very problematic for myself and my neighbors. Last night, the construction continued quite loud until approximately 2 a.m. And you've got large piles being driven with loud thuds, a lot of vibration and noise that when measured is exceeding a lot of the code standards. I just am hoping and pleading that there could be some change to the allowed hours of construction and some consideration given to the amount of noise that's being generated by that construction project. It's just created a lot of sleep deprivation, a lot of angry neighbors here, and we actually have never received any notice that this construction was going to occur. And so we're just hoping that there can be some attention given to this. I'm again grateful to all of you for their time and the opportunity to present this, but it's very frustrating. And I was going to be passive aggressive and have my son beat a drum every 5 seconds while I did this speech, just to drive the point home. And I thought I'd err on the side of just using that verbal reference to help. So thank you. I would be delighted to hear if there is any attention that can be given to reducing the hours of construction to perhaps between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Or aligning it with perhaps when planes are taking off in a southward direction from the airport to at least mask or consolidate the noise. But whatever can be done, you would have such grateful neighbors.
Mr. Frakes, I think we have some good news for you. I'm going to give the floor to Dan Brewer.
Hey, good evening, Council. Good evening, Jonathan. Just want to give a quick update on where things stand down at the marina. And yes, it has been obnoxiously noisy, no doubt about that. The good news here is that we think we have 1 day of pile driving and vibratory work left at the marina, and that'll be tomorrow during the day. We've got 4 or 5 piles that are already in the ground. We just have to push those down to final depth. And we think that'll be done by tomorrow afternoon. So after that, there won't be any more pile driving work, which should be good news. The remaining work that will cause some noise over the next couple of weeks, we have about 3 to 4 days of rock revetment work that has to occur before the 15th of February. Some of the challenges that we're faced right now, we have a federal fish window where all of the work in the water has to be completed before February 15th. The good news is there's only a few days of rock work left. The bad news is that that work has to occur during low tide times. And so we're trying to coordinate all of that in coordination with the low tides. So a couple more days of that over the next 2 weeks. I think that after the pile driving work tomorrow, I don't think they're going to be doing work this weekend. I can verify that, but we've got some high tides coming and they're not going to be able to do that rock work over the next couple of days. But a couple more days and evenings of rock work occurring, and then we'll be done with the noise by the 15th and the late night work and back to normal construction windows. So that's kind of the update on the noise and the conclusion coming soon. So just a couple more days and we'll be done with that.
So thank you, Mr. Frakes. Patience with us, but it's the long-term gain here for the short-term pain is going to be worth it. So we appreciate your time. Have yourself a nice evening. And this with that, there Anne did not come on, as I understand it. On
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, she's
With that, we're going to move on to the city manager's report. And with that, I yield the floor to Michael.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good evening. We just have one item tonight, and basically, Council always has the prerogative to describe situations as they choose, and we respect that. However, there can occur times when a full story or a full picture is not given or referred to, and we feel duty bound to kind of expand the answer so the community knows exactly what's going on in a larger sense. And that occurred with some comments that were made regarding Pack Ridge, that the only activity in Pack Ridge was police related. And that is very far from the truth. So we thought we would just put together for council's information a relatively brief PowerPoint on some of the other activities that occur on Pack Ridge. And so with that, I'd ask Susan to start, and then I think we'll go to Dan, and I think Assistant Chief Couey will also have some words in this. So thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Matthias. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Susan Cezar, Chief Strategic Officer. And as Michael mentioned, I will talk mostly about Midway Park and what's been going on there. And then Dan Brewer, our Chief Operations Officer, will talk about sound transit and some lighting improvements. And Mark Couey, Assistant Police Chief, will talk about code enforcement. Next slide, please. Midway Park, I mean, all the council members are familiar with this park. It's a relatively small open space for a very densely populated area. And it's heavily used. The community is pretty invested in this space. Right now, there's also the light rail construction, which Dan will talk further about. We've had programs ongoing in the park that include the National Night Out, as well as free summer meals for local elementary students and movies in the park. Some pictures you'll see. I know many of you have participated in these events. So you can see there, we've got Councilmember Nutting and I think Deputy Mayor Baxton in these pictures. Next slide, please. So the other things that have been going, we've been doing a lot of improvements in the existing park. And as you may recall, we partnered with the Seattle Storm and the Ray Foundation, which is the charitable arm of the, the Seattle Sounders. So at no cost to the city, they resurfaced the existing playfield into a mini pitch, which accommodates soccer and basketball. They used the artwork from Midway Elementary students on the goals so that students were able to participate in this project. They've also committed to free ongoing programming and clinics and free balls for life. So if any kids in that area need a ball, a basketball or a soccer ball, we can get them a free ball from the Ray Foundation. The city also put in some new site furniture to kind of give a basic a facelift there. We did new picnic tables, benches, garbage cans. The community garden also has been expanded recently, and a Boy Scout troop number 361 created a storage box for the garden. And then you'll see in the bottom picture, this is a really nice recent addition, and the Arts Commission commissioned a mural for the wall adjacent to the mini pitch, and the local students were also involved with that process. Next slide, please. This is the information that I just went over, so next slide. So then, as you know, this is a small space and a heavy population in that area. So we were looking at potentially expanding the park in order to several things. We wanted to accomplish increased sight lines from 28th Avenue South into the park, increase the park area and the ability for the area residents to use it. We also wanted to reduce the illicit activity that sometimes was occurring in the park, have the participation of the neighborhood to help build community, and to serve the existing and many new residents. Waterview Crossing, which is about a block away to the north, is about 326 units of affordable housing, and that is now occupied. Next slide, please. So we embarked on a project, which is a fantastic story. We identified 4 parcels adjacent to the park that we would like to acquire. And we applied for 2 rounds of grants from King County Conservation Features in 2019 and 2020. And we were awarded $3.6 million total without any match requirement. And this was one of the first times that King County granted a match waiver. We had to make a case for that. This was a new program in 2019. With that, we were able to acquire the 4 parcels, the 2 to the north with the 2019 funding, the 2 to the south with the 2020 funding. We also were able to provide monetary relocation assistance to the tenants and demolish the structures. And this is an incredible amount of work that was done in a relatively short time to be able to receive the funding, negotiate with the owners. Most of these, in fact, none of these parcels were on the market. So be able to come to an agreement, close the sales, and then get the structures demolished. In fact, King County staff use Des Moines as the example of how an acquisition can be accomplished within 1 grant cycle. Next slide, please. So here are the properties before. One of them had a single family home, 1 was vacant, and 2 of them contained 4-plex structures. And then next slide. So here they are after. It's just an incredible difference of expanded open space and views into the park. So we're really proud of what's been accomplished here. Next slide, please. So then what are we going to do with that new area? And we definitely wanted the community's ideas of what that should look like. So as part of our Parks, Rec, and Senior Services Master Plan update, which you just approved the updated plan in December, we did some outreach at Midway Park. Our consultants and our staff were there and took input from the area residents. And through that process, we came up with a concept. We are also seeking additional grant funding to complete the design. That application's been submitted, but we don't yet know the results. But we also intend to have additional community input. Next slide, please. This is the concept that resulted from the community input so far, and it is just a concept. We will hopefully be able to obtain some funds for additional design work, and then have the community weigh in a little more and get down to some of the practical details of the design. Next slide, please. The city also uses what's called crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED. Many of you have heard about this before in the Pacific Ridge neighborhood. CPTED is a multidisciplinary approach to crime prevention, and it utilizes urban design and management of the built and natural environments to reduce the probability of crimes occurring. We start this process through the permitting system, and the police department reviews the developments to influence the design to be less likely to have crime. And as you've seen with the expansion of Midway Park that we've talked about already, that is everything we've been doing there is consistent with the CPTED principles, increasing the visibility, the lighting, activity, and definitely getting the neighborhood involved. Next slide, please. So another thing that's happening in Pack Ridge is new development. As we've talked about, the Waterview Crossing neighborhood, which is just to the north of Midway Park, has 326 units of affordable housing. As you may recall, there's a corner piece of property there just north of Midway Park and kind of to the south and west of Waterview Crossing. And that was at one time considered for a Dick's Drive-In. You might recall that process. We didn't get Dick's, but we got two others, and that what's going to be there right now will be a Popeyes and a Burger King. They are just about ready to issue the permit. The permit review is complete, and I think there are just some fees to pay, and we'll be able to issue the permits for that. Next slide, please. And then with that, I'll hand it over to Dan Brewer. Thank you.
I wanted to just give a brief update on the sound transit work that's occurring along the eastern edge of the Pacific Ridge neighborhood. This is a project we've been working on for quite some time, and now we're well into construction. As we started this process, we had identified a number of key issues that were vitally important for the city, and number one on the list was noise walls. We wanted to make sure that the cumulative impacts of noise from the Federal Way Link Extension project and the 509 project were fully mitigated with one noise wall. And that took quite a bit of negotiating to happen. And that combined wall is currently being installed out in the field. We're about 20 to 30% installed with that noise wall. The construction will be complete on that noise wall by May, from 216th all the way down to Ken Des Moines Road. The other issue that was identified early on was landscaping and tree mitigation. We wanted to make sure that we had, as Sound Transit came through with the guideway, that we had a nice interface between the community and their transit way. So landscaping mitigation, tree mitigation was vitally important. And I can't tell you how proud I am of our team. This is not a typo. They're going to be installing 2,360 trees in the Pacific Ridge neighborhood to replace the 412 that they removed. That was quite a challenge to figure out how to actually get that number of trees within the space that we had. I can tell you every square inch of space that we had available was used to put trees back into that neighborhood along the guideway. In addition to that, we have over 20,000 shrubs and ground covers going in as part of the landscape design. So that's really going to create a nice buffer between the guideway and the neighborhood. There's a few photos here of the sound wall going in on the one side. On the Des Moines side of that, you see a nice finish, or at least a textured finish on the wall. And on the other side, it's, you know, just a standard concrete finish on that, on the guideway side. Next slide, please. Some other improvements in Pacific Ridge that are worth mentioning is that Sound Transit will be making improvements to a number of the street ends up in Pacific Ridge. This is part of our Pacific Ridge Neighborhood Improvement Plan that was developed 20 years ago. They'll be building the cul-de-sac street ends on 31st, 219th, 220th, and 221st. There'll also be some improvements to South 224th, but those improvements are things that the city will be constructing, and Sound Transit is provided in lieu payments for the street end on 224th that we'll put together with some of our other Pacific Ridge improvement money, and we'll be making some improvements to 224th. In addition, they'll be making some in lieu payments for frontage along 30th Avenue South, just north of Kent Des Moines Road, where the old King's Arms used to be. So those are some good improvements coming there. Curb, gutter, sidewalk, landscaping, street lighting on all of these improvements. Next slide. So just real happy that Sound Transit's been good to work with on this, that by the time when they're done with the project, we're going to have really nice amenities for the neighborhood, a nice buffer between the neighborhood and the sound wall and the guideway with the landscaping. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what that looks like in the near future. Next slide. Unrelated to Sound Transit work, we've been looking at trying to find some places where we could make street lighting improvements in the Pacific Ridge neighborhood. We've been looking at some implementation of and studying where we have gaps in the lighting system, and we've identified areas where we could install some street lights. And then we also have some lighting that's being proposed and with the Waterview Crossing development. Next slide. I think it shows some of the locations here. It's kind of hard to see on this slide, but we do have some areas that are shown in the blue here that where we want to make some street lighting improvements where there's some gaps in our system. The yellow dots are kind of where we currently have our street lighting. And so those are some things we're going to be working and continuing to move forward on in the neighborhood. Next slide. All right, hand it over to Mark, I think, at this point.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the police department's part of this at making improvements and working on issues. The next slide is a pen map of some of the issues that we've worked on over the last 6 months. And although it looks like a lot, I guess it's about 3 or 4 issues per month. And you can see a lot of it is graffiti and illegal dumping and things of that nature. And so we are very fortunate to have a code enforcement officer that jumps right on any issues that we receive and addresses them immediedely. The next slide has a few pictures and shows kind of a ground view of the area. And This was mentioned earlier by Susan about the feature site of the Burger King and Popeyes. So that's going to change, but in the interim, we're monitoring and taking action whenever we have any issues that are brought to our attention or that we spot on our own. We have had a lot more code enforcement cases. Again, most of them are graffiti. I have to wonder, we suspended our volunteer program during COVID, and so this next slide shows a big jump in that. And we do have volunteers that in the past have helped us with regards to illegal dumping, graffiti, and garbage and abandoned vehicles and things. So it shows a bit of a spike last year. And however, again, we partner with other parts of the city to make sure that the area is clean and issues are addressed. And this next slide, it shows how we receive most of our reports, and the best way to contact us in a non-emergency fashion is to go online. Sounded like my time was up, but sorry about that.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Susan, for that update. One of the things that I want to add additionally is, in addition to all those activities, both social, recreational, community building, quality of life relative to code enforcement and all of that, at the same time, Pack Ridge receives an ongoing emphasis, patrols by PD as necessary. And so we have, in addition to these things, an ongoing, very focused law enforcement presence with strategies to address issues. Anything associated with gangs, with using Pack Ridge as it used to be used as sort of a haven. I think that a lot of that has changed. So we wanted to, Mayor, just bring the council and the community up to date on activities that have been undertaken up in Pack Ridge, and we thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciated that. Does any council member have any questions of the city manager on this subject? Councilmember Harris.
Yeah. Last year, is there the maintenance of the new trees and the bushes? Is there an sort of clarity or as to who's going to be taking long-term maintenance?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've done is Sound Transit will be responsible to maintain the trees that are on their property, and they will ultimately be responsible for some of the trees that are planted within the street frontage. There is a maintenance period on that where they'll provide some maintenance initially. That's pretty common with how we do new installations. Our code requires a 3-to-1 replacement. And so we have that 3-to-1 replacement because long-term we anticipate that 2/3 of those trees won't make it. So ultimately we'll have about 1,000 trees long-term that'll replace those 400 and some odd trees that were taken down. But that's something that 20 years down the line we'll have to do some thinning and things like that. But ultimately Sound Transit will be responsible to maintain their stuff and we'll maintain ours.
Thank you.
Councilmember Steinmetz, you had a question?
Yeah, was the acquisition of the 4 properties, was eminent domain used in that, or was it strictly just a straight up approach from the city, let's negotiate, or was there any leverage used?
No, we did not use eminent domain, and in fact, the grant funds that we receive do not apply to any use of eminent domain. So we just approached the property owners, and we had a very good real estate agent, Janelle Stonebeck, and she She was successful in negotiating 3 of the properties for us. The other one, it had a previous code enforcement thing, and believe the owner of that one approached us first, but we negotiated and closed at fair market value on those properties.
Thank you very much. Before we continue, I know that Councilmember Oxiger must be having internet issues and visual and audio. Can you hear us, Councilmember Oxiger? And can you communicate back? You're muted if you can see that button. Bonnie, should we just continue? Hoping that he connects before we get into new business, before we get into voting and so forth?
Yes, hopefully he can come back on in time for the vote. If not, we'll just have to note that he was unable to communicate his vote. We'll be voting on 5 members instead of 6 tonight,
Okay.
unless the legal feels otherwise.
For the public watching, if they're not able to be visually seen on the vote, we normally get a verbal separate acknowledgement of a opposition or for, and in this particular case, we have neither. So we just wanted you to understand what was going on. With that, we're going to move on to the new business, and City Manager, I'm not sure who you want to take over in that presentation, but I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan, I believe you're going to move that forward.
Yeah.
With Laura.
We have the PowerPoint for this. Here we go. All right. Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. Here tonight to talk about contract extension with RECOLOGY King County. RECOLOGY is our solid waste hauler. And we want to just talk about some issues we're having relative to our contract. So next slide. Just for some background, we started our contract with RECOLOGY in November of 2011. So just over 10 years now. RECOLOGY has been exceedingly collaborative. They've been a great partner to work with since the inception of the contract. We've issued 2 contract extensions with them already that were provided for in the original contract. And so it's time to start a new contract. Next slide, please. Some of the ways that RECOLOGY has partnered with us in the community, we have monthly reports and meetings with them. Laura meets with them, I think, on a monthly basis. We have a lot of citywide facility and event collections, outreach events. I know we've done a number of volunteer litter cleanups with our staff and their staff. It's been a while since we've done that, but we've done several of those. They have done a lot of curbside collection and for hard recyclable items. I know that a few years ago when we had Snowmageddon, not this last one, but a few years ago, I know they even were able to help us in getting some drop boxes put down for some of the neighborhoods that they couldn't get into. But that event alone was one that just speaks to the collaborative nature that we have with this with RECOLOGY. We were able to be one of the only cities, I think, where they were collecting garbage on a fairly normal schedule. We were partnering with them with our snowplow operations, and that worked out very well. Next slide. So as I mentioned, it's time to issue a new contract. Then the timeline that's normally needed for contract for solid waste, it normally takes about 24 months of time to go through that process. The first 12 months are needed for outreach, preparing a request for proposals, actually preparing a contract, putting that out, going through negotiations, selecting someone, and actually executing the contract. And that process generally takes about a year. From the time the contract is executed till actual startup of the contract is another 12 months. And that 12 months is typically needed for startup activities, purchase of new equipment, the trucks, carts, and whatnot, hiring staff, training that staff, getting all the paperwork set up, and establishing communications with our residents. So normally it takes about 2 years to go through that process. Next slide. So the issue that we currently are facing is that our current contract expires this coming October 31st. So that's 9 months from now. Under normal circumstances, we would have liked to have started this process in October of 2020. Ideally, we would have approved a new contract this last October. And that would have provided, 12 months for those startup activities that I had mentioned. So, obviously, COVID has created a little bit of an issue for us in that time frame. And the reality is we just need more time. We need more time in order to negotiate a new contract. So next slide. So we started working with Recology here over the last couple of months, more recently here, and coming up with a couple of options that we could present to you tonight for extending the current contract. Option one is basically approval of a 1-year contract extension at no cost. And in exchange for that, Recology wants the opportunity for us to negotiate directly with them on the new contract. The current contract would be extended for 1 year. So it would expire on October 31st, 2023. And that would provide us 21 months from now to negotiate and get a new contract in place. The second option that's available would provide a 2-year extension, but just given everything that would cause on the impacts that would create on Recology, they're willing to do that, but they would need an 11% rate increase that would be effective January 1st this next year. And under that scenario, we'd still negotiate with Recology and see if we could come to an agreement on a new contract. So under option two, a 2-year extension would the current contract with the rate increase that's shown, that would expire October 31st, 2024. And that would provide us 33 months of time from now. Our recommendation to the council is that we go with option one and extend the contract by 1 year. What we plan to do, effective as soon as we take action tonight, either tonight or first thing in the morning, we have prepared a draft contract that we plan to hit over the net to Recology immediately. We are assuming we go with option one, we are out of time. And we need to negotiate on that contract over the next 4 to 6 weeks and hopefully come to an agreement with Recology by early March and bring forward a contract to the council in March. That's our goal. If we're unable to do that, then we have more work to do. Recology has been a great partner, and we have no expectations that we won't be able to come to an agreement with them. We have hired a consultant to help us through this process. We've used this consultant before on our solid waste contract. It's a consultant that does a lot of, in fact, most of this kind of work in the Puget Sound area. And so we're working with them to help negotiate the contract. And one of the, actually, next slide, please. Let's see where I'm at. Okay, yeah, so a couple of motions. In fact, why don't I stop there? I've got the motions up and take any questions from the council at this point before we move on.
Muted, Mayor. Mary, you're muted.
But before I take questions, I just try to reach Councilmember Oxiger. Can you hear us or can you speak?
Mr. Mayor, I just got a text from him. He can hear us and see us, but he can't seem to unmute or connect visually.
Okay, with that, we'll continue with the meeting. Councilmember Nutting, did you have your hand up?
I did, Mayor, and of course, the motions are gone from the screen and I can't see them, but I'd like to make the motion that we, there we go. I move to extend the existing comprehensive garbage, recycling, and compostable collection agreement with RECOLOGY King County by 1 year and authorize the city manager to sign the contract extension substantially in the form as attached.
Do I have a second?
Second, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you. With that, discussion, recognizing people for discussion, Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, wow. So realistically, how many competitors are there for this type of work? Is one thing.
There are a handful of competitors. I can think of four other companies in the Puget Sound. I'm sure there's probably more
Okay.
that would do this work.
Okay, so there potentially could be options. Just, I mean, I was struck by your presentation that it almost sounded like standing up a new program each time the contract is renewed. Did I get that wrong, or?
What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, in other words, I guess I thought that, you know, they have the trucks in place and they have the staff. And so, you know, but it sounds like, you know, the part of the negotiation is for them to basically think of it as just a clean slate of how many vehicles and staff they're going to need and so on.
Yeah, I understand now. The timeframes that I was providing assume that we're unable to come to an agreement with RECOLOGY for whatever reason, and we had to switch to a different company. So if we had to switch to a different hauler, that's the kind of time frame that we would need to have. If we're able to come to an agreement on a new contract with RECOLOGY, then those timeframes aren't quite as lengthy. They still would purchase new vehicles, but they do have their current staff that would, you know, and their billing system and all that stuff is already set up with our residents. So that there is some time savings there.
Okay.
So we do negotiate a new contract based on new industry standards and things like that. So we kind of go through a new contract at this point. But
thank you. Last but not least, is there any sense of inflation in the solid waste market? Because you know, 11% may seem like, wow, 11% is a lot, but yeah, 11% may not be a lot 2 years from now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know the answer to that, but I really don't want to give my negotiating position away.
Oh, well, in that case, yeah, mum's the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Deputy Mayor Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to ask a couple questions about, I think that the public might be interested in how we're able to, you know, protect their interests when we're negotiating this service. So we do have, so it is mentioned, we've got a consultant. So this consultant, then they would be aware of what maybe our competitors are charging their jurisdictions, or the kind of rate increases that are happening regionally. I guess part one is that true? And then you did mention that, I think it's Epicenter, they contract our consultants for more than just this city. Are they pretty familiar with the regional activity when it comes to waste management? If you could clarify that, might be helpful.
Sure. I'll take the first question. As far as getting a comparison on rates, one of the tasks that we have our consultant working on is coming up with some rate comparisons for other cities in Puget Sound, especially the South Sound area. So we will be able to know what cities are paying at certain rates for certain types of services based on their current contracts. That'll be a good barometer for us to, make sure we're getting a fair proposal from RECOLOGY. So we'll be able to have that as part of the process. This is not like a normal, like a construction contract where you just take the lowest bid. We're looking for other factors as we make a decision. Customer service is way high up. We want to make sure that we're getting quality customer service for our residents with any hauler that we pick. So that's a huge factor in how we make a decision as well. As far as this particular consultant, Laura, I don't know, what, 80%, 90% of the city, they do a lot of work with cities. There's not many people that do this kind of work. So
no, very few. And so, yeah, this is the same consultant we used in 2010, 2011, probably involved in the majority of King County contracts. Currently, at least 2 other cities working with them on their new contracts. So very familiar. And so not just familiarity, but they are doing a formal rate comparison study that'll help us to assess as we work through this.
I'm going to go with Councilmember Steinmetz next.
Yeah, a couple of questions. During our last Snowmageddon a few weeks ago, people got pretty grumpy about the lack of pickup. I understood that was essentially a week, but some people felt it was much longer than that. Can you share with us what your understanding of that was, and how did RECOLOGY respond?
Yeah, it may have been, while we had that snow event kind of lasted almost a week in time frame, it could have been 2 weeks for some people who didn't perhaps get garbage pickup. And I don't know the exact time frame, how long it may have been for some folks, but I know here, and we have a different hauler. It was a couple of weeks even here with a different hauler where I live. I know they were making assessments of road conditions each day, and just wasn't safe for them to be out on the roads hauling. So I don't know, Laura, do you have any other input on the timeframes there? Or?
I don't specifically the timeframes. It was primarily safety. There's a lot of hills. It's making sure that the public and their workers are safe. And I think kind of like our crews, they've been really impacted by COVID. And so driver numbers may not have been where they typically are, but it was just, slick roads primarily.
We do have some provisions in our contract, and even the contract that we're going to bring forward, that deals with what happens in events like this, and how quickly they have to respond after the fact when we have to shut down for inclement weather and things like that. So there are provisions in the contract that cover our expectations of them.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris, I'll get you in a second. I'm just rolling through the group here. I'm going to recognize Councilmember Nutting.
Yeah, I don't know who this is for, but it's kind of a 2-part question. First off, since we switched to RECOLOGY, has our calls for service or challenges gone up or gone down? And the second part is as our challenges have arisen, how has staff been able to interact with Recology staff to resolve these challenges?
I would like Laura to answer that question because she's the one that takes the calls. And you can see by the smile on her face.
I can tell you between the previous provider and this one, just a fraction of the escalated calls that I had previously gotten come through. And so the few I do get, I either we have a designated government liaison or a direct line to their customer service staff, and those are responded to very quickly. Once again, like every business, I think they've been impacted by staffing and other challenges during COVID, and so they've proactively prepared a correction plan, working on always working on getting their staffing levels back up and their training back up so that they can be more responsive. They've implemented a new phone system for that, but I get very few escalated calls that haven't been sufficiently addressed for people.
Far fewer than the previous provider.
Yes, far.
Mayor, may I
Thank you.
add to that?
Yes.
Just one, we have proof of the answer to Councilmember Nutting's question. And that is a number of years ago when we had the whole kind of international complexity of the Chinese refusing to accept recycling. And they had to find new markets and new ways to address that. And if you recall at that time, Recology came to council, laid out what they were doing, communicated with the ratepayers. Here's the situation. Here's what we need to do. Here's the increases that we're going to have to put in place in order to continue to provide this service, given the international dynamic. And to be honest, I was so pleased with the way they handled it, because typically that would have been on us to deal with. And the fact is that they stepped forward and they came to council and they went out in the community and they explained it. And so I think there's some evidence of what Laura is saying based on that one incident. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dan, you had a comment to make too as well?
Yeah, I know Council Ann had hoped to speak tonight. She had sent an email to the council, and for those that may be listening, she had a question about electric, maybe using electric vehicles as part of the new fleet. We do, Michael and I were talking here as we were preparing to start this process of that very thing. We want to be sustainable, environmentally responsible, and certainly as part of our discussions with Recology, we want to look at options for what that might look like. I doubt very seriously that we will convert their entire fleet. There's still a lot of unknowns with this, but I like the idea of doing some pilot projects and studies with them. So that's definitely on the table. Just wanted to put that out for the record.
Thank you. Basically stole my question. So I'm going to yield the floor to Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. One last thing. Is it typical to have some kind of survey or public forum in this negotiating process? I mean, I'm not trying to, rain on the parade, but I've just received a ton of, really unhappy remarks about, and I understand it's from residents regarding their customer service and taking days to get back to them. I understand it's COVID, but it just seems to me like, there should be some sort of outreach process as part of the contract negotiation. Does that ever happen?
Councilmember Harris, when you receive those, aren't you forwarding them to our city to address? Typically, that's what we do so they could tally those complaints, et cetera.
I certainly tell residents to do exactly that.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so
But regardless, I'm just asking, is there a survey process and is there a forum for residents to be able to, give their input as to the quality of customer service? It seems to me that might not be a bad idea as part of the negotiation process.
Yeah. Under normal circumstances, yes, there would be that process. And you could still, if that was important for the council and the community, you wanted to build time in for that, you would have to choose option 2 and provide the 2-year extension with the rate increase. That would allow us the time to do that. Under option 1, we would not have that flexibility to build that into the process.
Thank you, Dan.
thank you. With that, Councilmember Simons, this is your second time. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry. Does staff have a recommendation as to the 1-year or the 2-year extension, and if so, why?
That was a tough decision. We recommend option 1 with the 1-year extension. I appreciate immensely that we were able to get these 2 options on the table from Recology. They've been very collaborative and cooperative with us to provide these options, given the reality that they could have just said no. And then we would, we'd be in a real pickle. The 1-year extension is helpful. It really helps level the playing field in a fair way so that we can negotiate fairly. The 2-year option with the rate increase, while I feel the rate increase is reasonable, the optics of that just aren't all that great as we start a negotiation process. So while it's fair, it doesn't look good. So that's why we think going with option 1 is probably the best for the community at this point.
Thank you, Dan. Moving forward, anybody who hasn't asked the second round of questions, have any questions? With that, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of supporting motion 1, and I don't have it up, so I can't read it. Raise your right hand, say aye. I see Councilmember Steinmetz. I see Deputy Mayor Buxton. I see Councilmember Harris. I see Councilmember Nutting, and I believe I see Councilmember Oxiger there. Motion pass, and myself. Motion passes 6-0. Councilmember Nutting.
I think the motion passed, but
Yes.
I can read it back in. I move to extend the existing comprehensive garbage recycling.
I believe we're approving motion 2. Is that not correct?
Correct. Motion 2.
Yeah.
There's 2 motions to this item.
Oh, I'm sorry. I move to direct administration to negotiate with Recology King County for new solid waste collection agreement.
Second, Deputy Mayor.
Is there any discussion or questions before we go to this vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Councilmember Steinmetz, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Oxiger, and Councilmember Nutting, and myself. Motion passes 6-0. And I believe that concludes our new business. Moving on to future consideration, there's something I'd like to say here because I think we got a little way from what the purpose of this is. I just want to remind our council what the purpose of the introduction of items for future consideration. When we move to new business, this time is for the sole purpose of proposing new items that have not previously been before the council for discussion on a future agenda. This is not for questions about old business. Council members can submit questions or seek updates on previously discussed business to the city manager at any time. Do any council members have new business they would like to propose? Seeing none, we'll move on to board and committee reports, and I yield the floor to Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Councilmember Harris.
Let's see here. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the Trout Unlimited, delivered the fish to the coho pen, and go take a look. It's across from the quarter deck, and for the next 90 days, they're going to grow and get fed, and 30,000 salmon will be released into Puget Sound. Let's see here. For next Tuesday, next Tuesday, the Port of Seattle Commission will have its annual local legislation discussion. And this is the meeting where they basically allocate money for sound insulation packages for the year. Senator Kaiser and Representative Orwell, there was a meeting in December to talk about how to have the port, incentivize the port to start providing updates to port packages that had any number of problems, and doing it, making that part of their annual budget. Next Tuesday is the meeting to discuss that. And I hope that my colleagues can testify, write, call, smoke signals in support of this notion. There is an existing program at San Francisco International Airport that's been working quite well for several years now. It's very simple and easy to implement. And the port, surprisingly with COVID, is doing fantastically from a financial standpoint. And for the first time in 15 years, they have a fully staffed crew to do the updates, to do any sound insulation system. So now is the time to get this part of their, just to make it part of their annual program. I would have sent you the background information, but I did not know it was going to be on the agenda until just today. So I will send you a little memo, and I hope that you can support this. We've been waiting a long time for updates to these port packages that have all kinds of issues. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Moving on to Councilmember Steinmetz.
Okay, I attended the police advisory or citizens advisory committee this last week, and there are some very good statistics that they were able to put out, particularly on use of force. I don't have an output of that in front of me, but I think that a lot of people would be surprised at how little use of force our police department uses on occasion. So I think that is available somewhere, and I will endeavor to make it available to everybody. Other than that, I am going to try to be out at the quarter deck again from 10 to 2. If anybody wants to come talk to me about the appointment process, I'd be happy to meet with you there. So that'll be on Saturday. I don't want to forget the day. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Councilmember Steinmetz. Moving on, can Councilmember Oxiger, are you able to speak? We can see your photo.
Yes, I am.
Okay, you have the floor.
I apparently have two links here for some reason.
There is an echo.
Okay, I really have nothing to report. So.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to Deputy Mayor Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. So last week, in regard to what Councilmember Oxiger might have reported, Sound Cities Association had a welcoming event for all the newly elected officials in King County, any who wanted to attend, and it was well attended, and Councilmember Oxiger also attended, and as I'm on the board for Sound Cities, I was there as part of the team welcoming, and it was a great networking event. I also attended the Regional Safety Law and Justice Committee and this last week, and there was an interesting presentation on restorative justice options that many people are trying to put out into the region. Basically, restorative justice is an option for like including therapeutic intervention into the court system, where the judges and behavioral health professionals are involved in working with people who have committed crimes. So that's a concept that's moving forward in the region. I also attended South King Housing and Homelessness Partners board meeting, executive board meeting, and there was an interesting presentation on housing benefit districts, and that the legislature is considering some legislation that would allow jurisdictions to create a district within their city or community that would be able to collect resource from citizens that could then be directly applied to housing, affordable housing and homelessness. So that is under consideration, hasn't passed, but just another interesting idea that's coming out into the possibly our state. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. On Saturday, I attended the South Shore Condominiums Home Condo Association meeting, and it was very informative. It was great to talk to them. I told them that they were in one of the most exciting places in the city with all the change. It appeared they got quite a bit of misinformation that we had to work through, and I want to thank staff for helping get some of that clarified with direct communication, so I appreciate that. I also attended the Police Chiefs Advisory Board, and I thought Mr. Steinmetz did a great job of that. Councilmember Nutting and myself met with the What's Up Des Moines folks, Doug Meyer in particular, and we were very impressed with the way he wants to bring a lot of our businesses together. So we shop some ideas, and I'm very excited for what's going to move forward from his organization in that endeavor. Also, I met with SR3 and a few of other residents in town, and we discussed the CPUP fundraiser again, which was tremendously successful the year before, and it was quite exciting to see. And today, tested in front of the Department of Transportation on the catalytic converter bill, which seems to be getting some steam with a shorter turnaround date and so forth. So I was optimistic about that. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn? I recognize Councilmember Nutting, and do I have a second from Mr. Steinmetz, Councilmember Steinmetz? Okay, with that, everybody will raise their hands. The adjournment passes 7-0, and you guys have a great day, and the next meeting will be on February 10th. Look forward to seeing you there. Be safe this weekend.